There's no reason to lose heart. The words of Myanmar's pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi addressing a large crowd a day after she was released from 7 years under house arrest. Will Myanmar's opposition come together under her leadership, or has she turned into an icon of symbolic value with limited political power? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. Welcome to the programme. Aung San Suu Kyi has come to embody the struggle for democracy in Myanmar, a Nobel Peace Laureate who's refused to leave her country, keeping the plight of its people on the international agenda. She's been detained by the junta for much of the past 2 decades. Her release on Saturday greeted with emotional scenes. This report from Al Jazeera's man in Yangon, who we're not naming for his own safety.
The day after the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, thousands of people came onto the streets of Yangon. Myanmar's pro-democracy campaigner may be a free woman now, but her movements were restricted by her supporters, who flocked to the headquarters of her party, the National League for Democracy. With her house arrest at an end, she came here to begin planning her political future and to address those who had stuck by her throughout her detention. Inside, Aung San Suu Kyi spoke about her unconditional release and turned her attention to how she can help her country as it makes the transition to a democracy.
So all I can say is that I'll try to achieve it as quickly as possible, but how soon I'm able to achieve democracy depends very much on how much support the people will give us.
Earlier in the day, the transformation at her house continued, with the fences designed to keep her in and others out being removed. She was able to leave her home as a free woman for the first time in 7 years, after being released by the country's military rulers on Saturday afternoon. It was her first chance to see how the nation has stagnated economically, thanks in part to international sanctions which she campaigned for. Now she's willing to help lift them because she says the country needs help. Her release came a week after Myanmar's first election in 20 years. Suu Kyi was banned from standing, while the NLD has been dissolved as a political party after boycotting the poll. Some say she and the NLD missed an opportunity, but she said she has no regrets.
I would define it as something that is in the hearts and minds of the people. I didn't found the National League for Democracy to be a party per se. I found it as a movement for democracy, as an organization for achieving democracy for Burma. And as long as the people want democracy in Burma, this organization, whether those who are in authority claim that it is legal or illegal, this organization will continue to exist.
Aung San Suu Kyi is free once again, leaving her supporters with hope that she can fulfill her promise of delivering true democracy. Al Jazeera, Yangon, Myanmar.
Right, well, joining us now to discuss this are our guests who all know the country very well. In Bangkok, we have regional expert on Southeast Asian issues, Larry Jago. In Kuala Lumpur, Neo Mint, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Aung San Suu Kyi's political party, the National League for Democracy. And from London, we have the author Justin Wintle, who wrote the book Perfect Hostage, all about Aung San Suu Kyi. Mr. Neo, let's start with you. You know her well, although I believe you haven't met for over 20 years now. What's your reaction to the events of the last 48 hours?
Yeah, I think this is a very tremendous moment for not only for our political activists, but also the rest of the people of Burma, all the ethnic nationalities and Burman alike. See the hope that she could, do something for our future, our country future. But she really needs our support and other ethnic and democratic and all together, united together, and then to fight for that democratization and human rights security in Burma.
Well, as soon as she was released, she came out and spoke to people. She addressed thousands of supporters who'd gathered at the headquarters of her political party, calling for face-to-face talks with the junta's leaders. She said, "I believe in human rights and I believe in the rule of law. I will always fight for these things. I want to work with all democratic forces and I need the support of the people." She went on, "I am for national reconciliation. I am for dialogue. Whatever authority I have, I'll use it to that end." Larry Jago, you have followed this very closely for many years. Does that sound like a tone of compromise from her?
No, I don't think it is a compromise. She's stuck very carefully to her principles. She wants dialogue and national reconciliation. She's not prepared to force her views on people, but she's also not going to be cowed by the junta. I think she's taken a very measured approach, and she's saying that what we need is national unity. And I think she's handing out an olive branch, not only to the military, but also to those members of the pro-democracy movement that decided that they would compete in the elections, even though the National League for Democracy called for a boycott. And more importantly, she's offering an olive branch to the ethnic minorities. And by and large, she is the only one who can unite Burma. The military have proved they cannot do that, and that's what everyone is now expecting.
Justin Wintle, you wrote a book about Aung San Suu Kyi. Do you agree with that? Or do you think we're going to see more confrontational scenes as we saw in the past, a mass protest down the line?
Well, I don't think those two things are necessarily contradictory. I agree with what Larry Jagan has just been saying, of course. I think that Aung San Suu Kyi has a lot of very difficult challenges ahead of her. She needs to try and persuade the junta that they haven't over-risked by setting her free. And it seems to be a bit of window dressing, another piece of window dressing on that part. But if she's very astute, she will build a bridge with them and perhaps be able to talk, if not to Senior General Than Shwe, at least to one or two of his colleagues. One thing I feel quite important, really, is that there's a lot of talk at the moment about investigating electoral fraud, electoral malpractice, etc. I think it would be wiser to treat the election for all its faults as done and dusted, because the regime aren't going to move on that. Set that to one side, swallow your pride on that, and that would be a gesture to the regime which would say to them, maybe this person is not so dangerous for us, and try and move things on that way.
Neo Mint, time for her to swallow her pride. Do you agree?
You know, like, I don't think that, you know, she's going to be too principled, or, you know, she's going to be too rigid for that, because, you know, then she already learned that the past 20 years, then, you know, the past 20 years, then ethnic and other Democrats are alike, you know, we seems to be united, but not really. But this time she called the unity, and then she called the other, you know, needs of the country, how we united together and to fight. At the same time, you know, what the Justin said that a while ago, that, you know, this is a very difficult moment, that how how she's got a leverage to face the regime. Of course, I don't really see that any positive sign from the Senior General Than Shwe, but we need a people power. When you look at it in the Philippines in 1986, that's a people power just after the election. So Burma could happen anytime.
Larry Jagan, talk of maybe her doing it differently this time. Do you think she made a mistake last time with the way she handled things? And we've had this twice before, her being released and then being arrested again.
Well, I think there was always a danger that if she challenged the regime too much, she was going to be rearrested. I think she knew that even after the first time she was released in 1995. I think she tried in 2002 to be conciliatory. There were, after all, talks between Aung San Suu Kyi and the military intelligence chief, Kin Yunt, at the time, that led up to her arrest. She thought they had made some agreements, but it proved that the top general, Than Shwe, was not prepared to abide by them, and that forced her into a position of being a little more proactive. I think she's probably a little more careful now. It's 7.5 years since she was arrested, and I think she's had a lot of time to think. I think she understands that the elections are a big block to the way forward, but I think she's decided to sidestep them for the moment and talk about what kinds of things can we agree on. hints that maybe she'd be prepared to compromise on the issue of sanctions. And I think the key thing that she has said today is that she wants to meet Tan Shui, or at least representatives of him, over a table to discuss and find out where they can agree. I think that would be a very sensible way forward. It is not being deliberately provocative, and she's always said that actually a dialogue, a national dialogue, was important, not to find out a winner, but to find causes where both the military and the opposition and the ethnic groups can work together so that the people of Burma benefit. Everybody benefits.
Yes, Justin Wintle, I want to ask you about the way this has been portrayed in the media in recent years, over the last 20 years or so. It has all been personalised around the lady, as she's known in Burma. Do you think that's helpful or unhelpful?
I think you're absolutely right in what you say. I mean, look, she is a terrific combination of the small, frail, elegant, delicate, beautiful woman who's got this lion heart inside, and for media, particularly Western media, that is a knockout. And so it's understandable that through laziness as much as anything else, the Western media have always focused on her, and she's been the prism through which the whole of Burma is regularly seen. Now, what that does is, and that's not a bad thing given what her values are, but it distorts the picture. People often talk about the regime and the people in Burma as though the people were one and indivisible. Well, they're not. Although Suu Kyi obviously has terrific following in Burma, there are those amongst the ethnics, activists and insurgents as well, who are far more interested in autonomy for their own people. Again, you've got a class, a military class of officers particularly, who are quite satisfied by the way things are going, and there are some people in trade who know which side their bread is buttered on, or whether the rice is boiled or fried, as they say that. I'd just like to go back to the business about sanctions. I mean, because the West has imposed sanctions, it's sought to isolate the regime, and it's isolated the country as well, but it's also isolated the West in a sense. What is remarkable at the moment is that there is an opportunity that we can actually help on the sanctions front. It's quite clear that Suu Kyi is having a major rethink about sanctions. We should be having a major rethink because it hasn't helped. They haven't achieved their ends. It's kept Burma impoverished, which affects a lot of people. If we could, that is America, EU and UK, say, OK, guys, we're going to scrap sanctions in order to move things forward, and she was tied in with that process, that might create a circumstance in which there would be dialogue between her, not necessarily with Tan Shui, who's old and isn't going to be around much longer, but hopefully there'll be some other emergent military leader with perhaps a wider intelligence.
Neo Mint, let me put that point to you.